In this video I'm going to demonstrate PostTrans XML API for Sage 200. Effectively we're going to bring in a sales order for an account from an external system. Now the external system knows the accounts, maybe it's an external website or whatever, but it knows each account as a nasty great big long GUID number which Sage 200 cannot squeeze into its account code field because it's restricted to 8 characters. So how can we manage that? Well, before we begin, here we are on the website, and obviously you can see you've got customer account and transactions here. I just want to point out that if you go to this page here, at the bottom of the page is a whole big table full of all the tags or the entities or whatever you want to call them, the fields in Sage 200 that you can update using PostTrans XML API. So we've got the program up here running away. It's set to auto import, so it could be sitting on a server somewhere, or you could run it periodically through the day. You could press the import button or whatever. Okay, it can download files from FTP or IMAPI, or can be submitted into its indirectory. So the indirectory is being monitored, and with the installation comes a series of examples. I've got the examples open up here, so I'm just going to hone in on this one example here, numbered 158 Sales Order. Let's right click on it and we're going to open that up, and there we can see our XML, and we can see the tags that relate to that table we've just seen. So let's talk about the structure of this XML file. Now basically we have records, so it's a bit like HTML. We start a record and we end a record. So that's our settings, that's our mappings, that's our company code, etc. So the first setting here says settings. This is completely optional. This allows you to designate the Sage 200 company you're going to import into, and it also allows you to override the global settings. Global settings can be set for the whole import software. It's very useful to be able to override them for testing purposes before or whatever. So it's kind of optional whether you include that section or not. Let's move down. We've got a customer record there, and we can see we've got name and address and credit balance and all that sort of business on there. And then we've got a transaction header, followed by a series of transaction lines. So here we can see we're setting it to a sales order. If I wanted to set it to a sales invoice, it would be an SI. If I wanted to set it to a sales invoice going into the invoice module, it would be an SIM. An SCM would be a credit note to the sales invoice module. An SC would be a sales credit and all that. You can all find that information on the website in those lovely tables. You can see there we're importing a description followed by a couple of stock items and an additional charge for some service, and actually an additional charge for carriage, which is set up within Sage 200. A fairly complex sales order. So the whole point of this example is it's explaining about this external reference coming from our external system. Sage 200 cannot store more than 8 characters in the account code. So how can we handle it? Well, luckily PostTrans for XML API can handle this. In the settings here, we've first said reset all your global settings, and then we said, okay, I'm going to map the customer code to a counter. It's going to be prefixed with an underscore, and I'm going to store it in spare text 1 within my customer record in Sage 200. Now obviously you'd probably want to go in the SQL Server and index this field so it can be quickly retrieved. And then we've said, okay, I'm going to rename the tags, because normally they're called CH account code and CU reference. That to designate the customer record, and that to set the customer count on the header of the transaction. So we're going to call them GUID, so we can rename them GUID, so it makes more logical sense down here. So when this file hits PostTrans, it's going to say, right, is that GUID, is that a valid customer stored in the spare text field? If not, create it. If it is, update it. And also we've set some options here to say, yeah, okay, but set the credit limit on create, but never set it again. you don't actually need to include it if you didn't want to set it again, but there is an option to set this within the software itself. So effectively you set a field in here and it leaves everything else untouched. I mean, it's if you're going into Sage 200 and typing it in, all by magic. Anyway, so that's going to create a record or update the record. So say someone's got an online account, they might have changed their address, this will handle it. Moving back down to the transaction, we're setting the transaction type as a sales order. Could be an SI for a sales invoice or an SIM for a sales invoice going into the invoicing module. Whole load. They're all listed in that table on the website. But more importantly, we've set the GUID there. So now that's going to actually convert that back to whatever account code Sage 200 will know it has. So I think that's enough talking. Let's actually see that file go into the system. Let's simply move and copy it into the in directory, and we should see it's just triggered off, and it's just said there, look, it's created account code 8 with an underscore in front of it. So all your external customers could be, that would then appear at the end of your customer list. And it created sales order 514. So let's go over to Sage 200 and see what happened. So yeah, we can see there it had 6 as the next record, and it's created 8. I think I did a test. And there is our account created with all the various settings that we wanted to pop in. And of course we could set all the analysis codes and all that sort of business as well. So now if we go into the sales order processing, we should be able to find the invoice we were seeing there. I think it was, what was it called? 5147. Oh, there we go. 5147. So the account code on there should be, underscore 008. And there's our comment line, our 2 stock items, our service charge, and an additional charge placed on the sales order ready to be processed within Sage 200 itself. It might be also worth pointing out that this was then moved to a subdirectory, either is failed or imported. If it's failed, you'll get an email to a designated person to say it's failed. They can actually go in this directory and they could say view it in a text editor. And at the top here it will list the reason it failed, and they can then correct the problem, edit it simply, and resubmit it into the in directory for importation. But if it passes, here's the one that we just did, I believe. You can see it's moved to the imported directory, and there we can see the sales order that was created by the file. So there's a nice little bit of history, and we can see that it created account number 8 in there. So there's some traceability from the import. You can optionally turn that off and have the file deleted if it's successful. And there we go. That's simple.